I've mentioned before a friend who is a Buddhist and a very well-trained Buddhist by the Dalai Lama, as I see it, and most earnest. He teaches Buddhism. If you ask him, what do you think? He says, well, the Buddhist view is. It doesn't want it to matter to him that what he thinks. What he wants to matter is what the Tibetan Buddhist view is. In as far as his teaching is concerned, and his teaching is his calling. It's part of his Bodhisattva appreciation that is determined to help all life if he can, in as far as he can. The key thing in his teaching is the dismissing of the transitory as in some sense worthless, but that everything in this dimension, this universe, is transitory. And we are bemused or bewildered, or preoccupied with the transitory, and gives us the illusion of reality as he sees it that we live with. I take personal issue with devaluing, in some sense, the benefit of the transitory, because, of course, as I take it to be, it has the incredible value of teaching us what is truly of worth to us, which I personify in my ideal understanding, so to speak, as being God. And that from that perspective, my perspective, God uses the transitory to great blessing. In other words, what presents as good and bad here, in the hands of my God, is an eternal blessing. He is able. And we are ideally overflowing with gratitude, love and loyalty to him. And I say loyalty because we are in that difficult situation, so to speak, of childhood, for which the parent rescues and helps and blesses and cares for us through to life eternal. So there are some things that are not so happy in the transitory, to put it mildly. But if you're holding Mum's hand at the time, well, you can get through. And her loving kindness is our salvation. So I see God, the personification of all that I value, as being in that role of Dad. What I take to be the true, deeper message of the Jesus story. You know, I've mentioned it a lot before. Jesus refers to God as Father over 100 times in John's Gospel alone in the story. 200 times in the Gospels more generally. take that to be the fundamental message of the story. And a practiced thankfulness to God that dominates our purpose seems to be an incredible blessing as regards what we might refer to as spiritual blessings, peace, joy, hope, assurance, grace, forgiveness, compassion, empathy, loyalty, earnestness, integrity. You can make your own list, but the list you make will be incredibly common, I think, to all of us. In other words, there's something about the consequence of our experience here. To whatever age you've got to. And in a sense, despite the incredible variety of life that each of us has had, there's an incredible correspondence as to the character of what God would be if he exists. Not that as individuals we necessarily think he does exist, but in some sense we know what character we would anticipate him to have if he does exist. That's both extraordinary in a sense, superficially, but the more you think about it, the more reasonable that is, because, well, at least we come from similar cultures, and really the cultures are not so dissimilar, and they're coping with the same fundamental needs and fundamental type experiences that we have whilst we're in this domain, our life here on the planet. Where was I? Let me pause and review. Ah, yes, I was saying the importance of the transitory then. It's not that I dismiss the transitory pleasures or the pains as, in some sense, white noise. No, I feel that each detail of life is part of an amazing picture, portrait, painting, complex of the detail of our path to glory, to heaven, to enlightenment. Which I choose to trust is an eternal enlightenment and of great fulfillment, continuing endless fulfillment. Yes, I do appreciate the permanent in that sense, and that the transitory is actually vital in achieving such, that every detail of it could, in God's perfectness, be a blessing, be a contribution, be part of this eternal kingdom. And if the Akashic record exists, if you like, the mind of God forgets nothing, holds every detail that's good to hold, which may be every detail, since he's the inspiration and creator of all. Nothing is lost. Everything is valued. The good and the bad as we see it as children But as Mum and Dad know, ideally, it's for the best. So I take it that we have wisdom and understanding simply from our experience, and applying such our childhood, now that we're more of an adult, so to speak, helps us understand our role and position in relationship to the eternal, to our Heavenly Dad. And of course, thanking God for all that is good, at least, focuses us in a very positive way on all the pleasures of life. And yes, in this world they are transitory. In at least in large measure. Doesn't make them any less valuable. I often cite the sort of almost comical presentation that I've had at least 3 wives, and more than that in terms of meaningful relationships, if I add in those that before I was married, officially. One very long relationship, but others incredibly significant to me. I wouldn't be without any of them, whether they were transitory or in the past. But if God remembers all, so will I. And that's lovely. And I thank God for the blessing of every detail. I mean, the obvious, my mum and dad were transitory, they're both dead. Transitory in terms of this life. At least, so to speak. And possibly the least. But without them, I would have been lost. Well, not even been in terms of this planet. So they are of great value to me. And I'm very glad I appreciated and made such as I did of them. And have done since. I think we are blessed by every good thing that God has done. Everything that He's done, and perhaps in a sense He is the one that's done everything. I choose to think so because I find such choice a blessing in practice. So I actually thank Him for some of the difficulties, which, yes, I agree with my friend, they are all transitory. Everything comes to an end here, it seems, at least. Well, what a blessing. Difficulties come to an end too. And they leave us with a very clear purposing for that which is good and against that which is evil. How do I define good and evil? That which seems to bring life and joy and peace and hope and assurance and goodness, and you know the list again. That I call good. And that which tends towards the absence of such, I call evil. And the evil that God has me understand, see, even experience at times, is for good. That I become very sure of what I value and what I don't. And it occurred to me rather strongly yesterday evening that God may be building something much deeper than even our values for eternity, but our inclinations to such values. You know, something even prior to values. What draws us to have values at all? You know, there's a notion that some persons are amoral. They have no morals. It's not that they have the wrong set of morals. There's just no morals at all. I'm not sure if there's anyone who's truly amoral in that way. I'm not clear they could have survived very long in the world, but it's an interesting notion, isn't it? But in some sense, I'm thinking that, yes, one needs to cross that barrier too. Perhaps that's an initial foundation barrier, which God helps us hurdle, a foundation that God creates in us, that we have an inclination for an ethical, moral code. And then there's the detail of what's in it, which is perhaps largely furnished by being here in this life. And perhaps, as the Eastern people have thought, we don't move on from keep experiencing this life until we've got it. You know, perhaps you don't need the perfect ethical makeup before you move on to heaven. Perhaps you just need a certain basis that it gives you the appropriateness for entry to heaven. And as indeed some Eastern view is, that, more the Hindu type view, that Indian view traditionally, which has been, you might spend some time in heaven and then come back here to sort out more details of your personhood. But that in the Jesus story understanding, we are in the whole process children being nurtured into an adulthood of abundant life eternal. Part of the great, unbelievably great host of heaven. God's family, so to speak, from our childish point of view, a wonderful fellowship for both God and ourselves. And from the Buddhist point of view, hopefully, all life. Am I to suppose my God has mistakes, that some don't make it? No way. I find it far more beneficial to believe and trust that he loves all, that he has made, and that he's made all. But more importantly and simply, to live in the trust that he's our dad and we're his loved children, heirs of grace and heaven eternally. Love you, Dad. Thank you, Dad.